Hotep, everybody. This is Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, November 24th, 2024, and we are live. Welcome to the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, writer, and historian, as well as national political commentator. So many of you all have seen this viral clip of Representative Jasmine Crockett from Texas talking about how white people are not the victims of oppression. And this took place on Wednesday, November 20th, 2024, in a House of Representatives committee hearing for a markup session for the Dismantle DEI bill of 2024. Dismantle Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion bill of 2024. Now, on Friday, November 22nd, 2024 on Roland Martin Unfiltered, we got a chance to speak with Representative Jasmine Crockett. And I asked her to explain to us exactly the ramifications if that bill becomes law. So first off, I'm going to play a clip of what she had to say in the committee hearing. Okay, let's go to this from her YouTube channel. And give us a thumbs up, give us a like, give us a heart on this broadcast. How's everybody doing today? Let's go to this clip.
So many of you know that I practice law, but some of you don't realize that I actually was a business major out of Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee. And the emphasis that I got in my business degree was on finance. And as I traveled the country campaigning this election cycle, one of the things that I talked about was this idea that in finance, we always promote this idea of diversity. If you know anything about a portfolio, the one thing that you want to do is make sure that it's as diverse as possible, because at times certain stocks will perform better than others, and they will exemplify various strengths and weaknesses. And together, a diverse portfolio is usually what any good finance person would promote. They wouldn't promote that you solely invest in vanilla wafers, believing that that is going to be the strongest portfolio, but instead they may want to add some chocolate cake and some Twinkies into the mix to make sure that we have the best portfolio, because there will be different preferences by different people, and again, there will be different strengths. But as I sit here and I think about what we say and what I'm hearing as it relates to diversity when it comes to anything outside of making money, and to be clear, we are losing GDP every time we try to push back on this idea of diversity, because all of us bring something different to the table. But you consistently said over and over the word oppression, and every time that you said it, it was almost as if I was hearing nails on a chalkboard, because it seems like you don't understand the definition of oppression, and I'd ask you to just refer to Google to help you out. Oppression is the prolonged, cruel, or unjust treatment or control. That is the definition of oppression. And so as I sit here as a Black woman who practiced civil rights, let me tell you, the reason that my colleagues wanted to make sure you understood the same Black history that your side of the aisle wants to delete out of classrooms is because you can then misuse words like oppression. There has been no oppression for the white man in this country. You tell me which white men were dragged out of their homes. You tell me which one of them got dragged all the way across an ocean and told that you are going to go and work. We are going to steal your wives. We are going to rape your wives. That didn't happen. That is oppression. We didn't ask to be here. We're not the same migrants that y'all constantly come up against. We didn't run away from home. We were stolen. So yeah, we are going to sit here and be offended when you want to sit here and act like, and don't let it escape you that it is white men on this side of the aisle telling us, people of color on this side of the aisle, that y'all are the ones being oppressed, that y'all are the ones that are being harmed. That's not the definition of oppression. You tell me the prolonged, cruel, or unjust treatment that you've had, and we can have a conversation.
You could start with Exodus.
The final thing that I will say on this particular issue, two things. There is an article from The Guardian, and it is a little old. It's from 2021. So I apologize. But it said that back then, just 3 years ago, white men represent 30% of the population, but 62% of office holders. These are the issues that we are constantly looking at and recognizing and trying to say, is this just? I can't even tell you how many white men have served in this chamber, but I can tell you that I am only the 55th black woman to be elected to Congress. And so when you want to talk about history and pretend as if it was so long ago, it wasn't. Because again, I am just number 55. Finally, when we start to talk about what do these numbers do as we're trying to say the diversity, equity, and inclusion is the problem, the reality is that when it comes to financial performance, companies with more diverse workforces are more likely to outperform their competitors. Companies in the top quartile for racial diversity are 35% more likely to outperform their peers on profitability. Companies with diverse executive teams are 25% more likely to generate greater profits. Diverse companies earn 2.5 times higher cash flow per employee. Diversity works. And until you can show me data that says otherwise, I think that we need to go back to being a country that listens to experts and gets out of our feelings and recognizes again that racism is real in this country. And until we stop pretending that it's not, we will not solve the problems that we are consistently facing. And that will bring real unity that we seek when we're looking for a more perfect union.
Okay, so so that was Representative Jasmine Crockett, and that took place on Wednesday in the it's a markup session in the House of Representatives over this anti-DEI bill. Okay, this anti-DEI bill. So what I'm going to do here is Representative Summer Lee was also on the committee in the same hearing, and Representative Summer Lee had a response as well. Now that was it sounded like Representative James Cromer of Kentucky, who said you can start with Exodus. Okay, I'll talk about that. You know, because I deal with that in my broadcast, dealing with the history of Easter and the origins of Easter, things like that, and we talk about the Exodus and things of this nature, the quote unquote, the mythological story of Exodus. Okay, this may go outside the circumference of some people's awareness, but go watch my whole presentation that I do. It's on my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep. Go watch my whole presentation I do dealing with the origins of Easter. Okay, Easter, Oistra. All right, so here's Representative Summer Lee. And I want you to hear what she had to say as well. Let me grab this clip here of Summer Lee also. Okay. And you have, and I've heard a lot of white Republicans, and this was one of the grievances of Donald Trump, who claimed that white people were the victims, the main victims of racism. White people experience more racism than African Americans, things of this nature. Okay. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race that comes out of the ideology of European white supremacy. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Racism occurs when one race of people control the majority of the wealth, power, resources, privileges, benefits, land, access to education, access to opportunity, jobs, money, healthcare, etc., and they use that to marginalize, subordinate, and do harm to another race of people. This is what racism is. When you've benefited from white privilege all your life, equality seems like oppression. So when you have people talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and giving opportunities to other people who have who normally would be overlooked for opportunities that they are qualified for, you have some people who've enjoyed white privilege all their lives who say, oh, that's racism, that's oppression. They want to skip over decades and hundreds of years of racism, white supremacy, and the maldistribution of wealth, power, and resources into the hands of Europeans. They want to skip over all that, okay, and then just say, hey, let's just wave a magic wand and say everything is equal, okay, and racism doesn't exist anymore, and let's have a colorblind society. Okay, but they don't want to deal with how wealth power resources has been maldistributed in America. Okay, so let's go to this clip here from Representative Summer Lee. All right, hold on. What just happened? All right, here we go. Let's see here. Let's try to do this again.
Ms. Lee, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not.
Okay, hold on. I want to run this off of Google, and I don't know why. All right, let's try this. Hold on. All right, there we go. I don't know why it was showing it to me full screen.
Yeah, Ms. Lee, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not in favor of the Dismantle Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Act, or what it maybe would more aptly be called the dismantling any semblance of support or opportunity for certain American acts. We know who those Americans are. Americans who have not enjoyed centuries of unfair advantages by keeping others enslaved or segregated or disenfranchised or incarcerated or redlined or gerrymandered or excluded by law. Americans who've lived with disabilities or had their relationships criminalized or their gender expression demonized. If we're being honest here, this bill, which will wipe out every diversity, equity, and inclusion program in our federal agencies, plus those who contract with us, plus those who receive grant money, plus our schools, is nothing new. This is just the final piece of a decades-long obsession with targeting and dismantling anything that might give marginalized people a fair shot, including DEI programs, which honestly started the second the Civil Rights Act passed. Policies like affirmative action and diversity, equity, inclusion are the closest things we've had to the mythical bootstraps that some of my colleagues insist historically and currently harmed communities need to pick themselves up by. After centuries of efforts to keep us out of schools and universities, from jobs and elected office, Republicans targeting these policies are no accident. Why do predominantly conservative white men believe that the success of a black person or the opportunity or access of a black person is an existential threat to them? DEI is not given any unfair advantage that society itself does not already confer on certain Americans. It merely exists to ensure that all other people, that women, minoritized folks, queer folks, disabled folks, have the same opportunities to succeed and thrive in our workforce and our schools as people who have not had those opportunities systematically and legally stripped from them do. Is our country not greater when all of us have opportunities to succeed and contribute and survive? Our success and our survival as a nation is bound together. Diversity, equity, and inclusion programs only exist to band-aid over decades, hell, centuries of discrimination against people's skin color, their religion, disabilities, gender, or sexual orientations, you name it. Contrary to Republican conjecture, remedying past discrimination is not, in turn, a discrimination. And we're not going to sit here and pretend racism is over just because one black person on the Supreme Court agreed that it should be. What DEI does not do is give some kind of magical pass to better jobs, like some of our colleagues are implying. That middle word, equity, does not mean more than or better than. It means treating people fairly and impartially. It means working to fix generational and systemic discrimination to the betterment of all of us in all of our institutions. But instead, Republicans are trying to bastardize the term DEI to be a slur. When Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson was up for confirmation and when Vice President Harris was added to the ticket, they called them DEI hires. They want you to believe that a Harvard graduate with over 20 years of experience, who happens to be a Black woman, is not qualified, but a Fox News personality is qualified to run the Department of Defense, and the WWE executive is qualified to run the Department of Education. Let's be real. There is an attempt to create a direct correlation between our race, being a Black person, and our qualifications. So much as to say that there is no way to be a Black woman. There is no resume that a Black person could have that would qualify them unless that Black person is a Republican. And there is a quota there. And while all of this has happened at the top level of our government, I can promise you these same things are happening on every single level of government and private sector. But those people don't have a national platform to speak out against discriminatory treatment. Where is a federal worker supposed to turn when another coworker says a racist comment to them in the break room? Where is the same-sex couple who is denied housing supposed to, because of their relationship, supposed to turn? Where is a pregnant woman who was fired for being pregnant supposed to go? Often the only place that they have to give them recourse are the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. These folks just want to do their jobs, serving the American people in an environment that feels safe and supports them. Making work a better, safer environment for some does not mean it automatically is worse for others. And those complaining about DEI training are probably the ones who need it the most. My Republican colleagues have got to stop punching down on already marginalized communities and face their own fears of a level playing field privately. It's shameful. I yield back.
Okay. So that was Representative Summer Lee as well, dropping some knowledge, bringing the facts. And I want to go to, I want to pick up on something that she just said. And she talked about Trump's nomination for the Department of Defense. And I'm going to go to, in just a minute here, I'm going to go to our interview with Representative Jasmine Crockett Friday on Roland Martin Unfiltered, Friday, November 22nd, Roland Martin Unfiltered, because I got a chance to ask her about this dismantle DEI bill and the ramifications of it. But let's look at this quickly here. So I posted this on my Facebook page, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP, and my fan page, the African History Network. And this is about Pete Hegseth, the Fox News host. And yes, he served in the military as well, but he's totally unqualified to run the Department of Defense, which is has a budget of about $900 billion a year. He's never ran any large organizations. So if we look at this here, and I posted this back on November 14th. So the current Secretary of Defense is Lloyd Austin, okay? And Lloyd Austin is a 4-star general, all right? It says here, this comes from thegrio.com, Trump's replacement for 4-star General Lloyd Austin, 44-year-old anti-woke veteran and former Fox host, Pete Hegseth. And he's a weekend host on Fox News at that. And I said here, here's another example of how this election was about a lot more than just fighting inflation. Also, Trump's nominations are going to his policies are going to increase inflation, his tariffs, and will probably cause a recession. Thegrio.com said America's next Secretary of Defense could be starkly different from what the country has ever seen before. On Tuesday, just a day after Veterans Day, President-elect Donald Trump selected Pete Hegseth, 44 years old, a former Fox News commentator and former Army National Guardsman. Okay, he's in the National Guard, to lead one of the world's most powerful militaries. Hegseth will succeed Secretary General Lloyd Austin III, the nation's first Black Secretary of Defense, a historic choice made by President Joe Biden in 2021. Now, Lloyd Austin is 71 years old. He's a four-star general with 41 years of service in the Army. He earned a Silver Star for his leadership in the Iraq War and later oversaw all combat operations in Iraq as commanding general of the United States forces, as well as military operations in Afghanistan in the 2010s. Pete Hegseth, a Trump loyalist who previously influenced the former president to pardon a group of military members accused of war crimes, has been outspoken against women serving in combat and is critical of what he calls a quote unquote woke military. He said any general, any admiral, whatever, with a connection to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or woke stuff, woke sugar, honey, iced tea, has to go. He said, he was quoted saying on a recent podcast. This is the stark difference between nominations coming from a Joe Biden, who nominates qualified people and who nominated a lot of qualified African Americans for various positions, and Donald Trump, who is nominating a lot of people who are accused of sexual assault or somehow involved in sexual assault. And many of them are totally unqualified for these positions that he's nominating them for. And some people are referring to this as affirmative action for white people. Affirmative action for white people, but affirmative action, a totally different type of affirmative action where you have unqualified people being nominated for positions. Okay, so let's go to, we talked about this here on Roland Martin Unfiltered on Friday with Representative Jasmine Crockett. I want to go to that clip because I asked her about this, and I'm going to let you hear a little bit of the conversation here that she had with Roland Martin. Let's go to this. We got to get past this ad here. All right. Let's flip over to this one. Oh, hell, it was the 134.
Capital directly through.
How oppressed they are as white men, and the things have just been so rough, Congresswoman. They're having a difficult time in this world because the oppression that they're facing. And then you got these commentators out there saying, see, right there. Congresswoman Crockett, she's the problem. That's the problem with these Democrats. They keep using this woke language, and this is why they're going to keep losing.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I was watching commentary from the New Zealand Parliament, and there was a line that really caught me as they're having kind of this struggle as it relates to Indigenous people. And the line was, when you are accustomed to privilege, to then have to deal with equality makes you feel as if you are oppressed. And that line hit me so deep because that's exactly what it is. These are people that have enjoyed privilege their entire lives, whether they want to recognize it or not. And for literally everyone, because I kept saying, where's Byron? Where is Byron? Is Byron about to jump in this? Because I want to see what Byron has to say, because Byron served on the committee as well. But for some reason, Byron wasn't around to debate this particular bill being marked up. And the author of it, Representative Cloud out of Texas, was complaining that right now they are being oppressed. And then there was an issue with Higgins out of Louisiana, where he was arguing that he had been oppressed because Ayanna Pressley asked him to stop misusing the legacy of Martin Luther King and basically honor the wishes of Martin Luther King's family. And he said, see, y'all are trying to oppress me. You're trying to take away my First Amendment right. And it was just frustrating because they consistently use this language and they really don't understand what oppression is, or they want to pretend like they don't understand. And that's why I needed to make sure I reminded them of what Google has defined oppression as. And I'm sure any other reasonable dictionary defines oppression in a similar way. And they are not being oppressed. They are whining little men.
You mentioned New Zealand, and of course, Parliament was temporarily shut down. This is what after Maori lawmakers performed a haka, a traditional dance demonstrating the community's anger over you talking about the treatment of indigenous people in that particular bill. Pull the audio up, y'all, real quick. Come on. Come on, I wish y'all break out in the haka on the floor of the house.
I don't necessarily see that happening, but there is this movement of the far right that we're experiencing right now where it's all about whitewashing. It's all about deleting. In fact, again, in that same scenario in New Zealand, they talked about the colonization. And one of the things that I wanted to make clear is that oppression looks like what my ancestors have endured, and they have nothing to reflect upon as it relates to their ancestors being oppressed in any way. If anything, they were the ones that were inflicting the oppression, at least their ancestors were. And that was why I wanted to remind them of that. But that's also why it's so dangerous that they want to delete Black history from our history books. Because if you don't know your history, then you're doomed to repeat it. And when you see the likes of, say, a Byron Donalds out there who wants to glorify things such as Jim Crow, it is important that they recognize that there are those Black folk like me, like Rep. Ayanna Pressley, like Rep. Summer Lee, that will not allow them to delete us and delete our pain out of history and then decide to move forward and inflict more pain.
This was a study done from researchers at Tufts University School of Arts and Sciences and Harvard Business School, where we're at a point now where whites believe that they are the victims of racism more often than Blacks. I talked about this in my book, White Fear, how the browning of America is making white folks lose their minds. I said in this book that we are living, I've been giving these speeches since 2009. And I was saying then, so the last 15 years I've been saying, we are living in this age of white minority resistance. We're living in this age where white Americans feel as if they are being discriminated against, they're being targeted, they're losing opportunities. So you got this DEI thing, you got all this sort of stuff like that, and they have created this hysteria that, oh my God, that their world is crumbling down. And then of course, then you got these Democrats who, we're spending too much time on identity politics. We're leaving these things behind. So you got Bernie Sanders, you got Chris Murphy, all these people. And what kills me is they act as if whiteness is not an identity. They act as if that's not real. And I sit here and so they're like, well, we need to get away from these things. And it's like, okay.
What's the fastest way to get relief for toenail fungus? Is it A, apple cider vinegar? Is it B, tea tree oil? Or is it...
And run to what? Because the reality is Donald Trump absolutely pressed the buttons of white identity. You look at the targeting of white men and males. Maleness is identity politics. And these white male Democrats, I'm like, I don't know what world they're living in where they can't see this, because for them, anything other than white is identity politics. But
Yeah.
anything with them, oh, no, that's just politics.
Exactly. No, that's exactly right. And it is important that we continue to make the record clear on who it is that's bringing this up. They continue to try to say it's the Democrats. We're not bringing this stuff up. Like, this was not a Democratic bill. This was a Republican bill that was being marked up. And I have every right to make sure that I challenge any bill that comes into my committee or any bill that comes on the floor. This wasn't us and something we initiated, but it is something that I felt very strongly about responding to and finishing, because it's just a bunch of games. And for those that are cowering and deciding that they are okay with towing the Republican line to where they are going to whitewash us, I have news for you. If you are a Democrat, it has been people of color that have held you down in your seat. That is for sure. Every single Democratic seat that you look at, 9 times out of 10, there is a person of color demographic that is holding that district down and making sure that it's Democratic. So, you know, when you're out there and you're saying that you're going to represent your constituency, it's not just the people that look like you. It's your entire constituency. And I try to do that every day that I'm in the House. But the reality is that just seeking equity should not be a problem in the land of the free and the land of opportunity. Acknowledging that there were wrongs that were done to people like me, to the extent that, yes, I am sitting in Congress. And so, yes, I have made it further than I could say the average Black woman, specifically when it comes to politics, knowing that I'm only the 55th Black woman to ever swear into Congress. But that doesn't mean that there aren't obstacles that exist because of the kind of built-in systemic issues that we have. And you can't start to fix systems if you decide that you're going to ignore that there's a problem. If there's no problem, there's nothing to be fixed. So the fact that they are trying to roll back the hands of time, and they said that this was all because they wanted to make sure that the most qualified people are working in our federal government, and I applaud my coworkers, especially Melanie Stansbury, who made a very good point of pointing out that Donald Trump is definitely not concerned about qualifications. When we look at the people that are being put into position, and I even made the point yesterday, and I said, I can't say that I agree with Senator Scott on anything. I can't say that I agree with Byron Donalds on anything, but I can tell you this. Those 2 Black men are more qualified to serve in some capacity in the Trump administration than the random people that Trump has decided to empower. But one thing is different about them, and is that they're Black. And that is what diversity, equity, and inclusion seeks to get rid of, is this idea that if it's white, then it's always right. But to absolutely say, we will at least give a look to somebody who is different. And what they failed to really talk about in that hearing is that diversity is defined the way in that particular bill in such a way that veterans are diverse, in such a way that it's including your sexual orientation, it's including your sex, it's including all these things. But it's not just race. It goes down to your religious background. It's talking about diversity as a whole. And they didn't want to talk about that. So there actually potentially will be a negative impact specifically on our veterans, because a lot of our agencies look at your service as a veteran, and they look at that, and that helps you out when it comes time to earn a position in the federal government. And now they don't even want to do that. And these are people that risk their lives to make sure that we can maintain freedom in this country.
Does it frustrate you?
All right. So look, I'm gonna pause it right there. You can watch the full interview at Roland Martin's YouTube channel, and that's from November 22nd, 2024. I'm going to go to when we got a chance to ask her questions, and I'm going to go to my question because I wanted her to further explain the ramifications if this bill passes. Now, if it passes the House, which it probably will, because Republicans control the House, in this Congress, this session, it probably won't pass the Senate because Democrats control the Senate. Okay, it's 51-49. But it could come up in the next. It could come up. It can come up in the 119th Congress. Okay, and it will. I think it probably needs 60 votes to pass. Hopefully, it doesn't need 51 because Republicans will have 53 or 54 seats in the Senate. So, because if it passes the House and passes the Senate, Donald Trump is signing it into law. If somehow it passed now, the House and the Senate, Joe Biden would veto that bill. This is once again an example of how elections have consequences. And go watch the November 6th broadcast I did the morning after the election, because I was in Washington, D.C. When I actually did that broadcast, and we dealt with what happened, what went wrong, etc. All right, so I want to go back to that clip in here. I got a chance to ask Representative Jasmine Crockett a question.
Of others, we know the numbers. We worked with the Sentencing Commission to get the numbers. We know how many are, know how many people would actually come home. So we are about to push it out, and we hope to get the support of the president. I did have an opportunity to sit down with the Attorney General sometime before the election to talk about this being something that I really wanted to push for in the lame duck. So that's really kind of like my one big Hail Mary that I'm trying to make sure we can throw. But that's obviously before January. Come January, it's just going to be defense, defense, defense.
Michael.
Representative Jasmine Crockett, could you please explain briefly what the Dismantle DEI bill of 2024 is? Because according to USA Today, if it became law, it would effectively close all federal DEI offices and eliminate federal DEI programs. We know that's part of Project 2025. Also, how are these white men on the committee defining the term woke? I hear them use the term woke, but they never define it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And great job in the committee educating them.
Thank you. They definitely don't have a definition of woke. As far as I'm concerned, if it's the opposite of what they want, then they consider it woke. As it relates to the bill, you're absolutely right. So when we start to talk about programs within various schools, whether it's, I was looking at a portion of the bill that talked about kind of how they're encouraging in the healthcare space there to be more diversity. And we obviously already are in a great shortage as it relates to healthcare because of COVID-19. It would remove all funding that would help those that are historically disadvantaged from being able to get funds that would help them to potentially, excuse me, be able to pursue their education. Excuse me. There was an amendment that specifically was put in by Rep. Presley that was specifically put in to make sure that HBCUs would not be defunded under this. Oddly enough, it did pass unanimously. So that was thrown in there because theoretically that could happen. Also, there's a provision that prevents someone who's been in any of these offices from transferring to another office. So if you ever worked in a diversity, equity, and inclusion office, then you would be prevented from transferring to another governmental kind of agency. Usually, if something gets shut down, then you have protections that allow you to go and transfer somewhere else. But basically, any funding that in any way is attempting to increase diversity in the federal government, it would be gone, as well as any positions, as well as the data showing us, this is how many. I want to say it was the FBI, how they now have to report the encounters, or at least keep track of the encounters and things like that. it will get rid of all of that.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
All right, then. Well, Congresswoman Crockett, listen, Thanksgiving is coming up. Get some rest. Enjoy the fam. And then, of course, got Christmas happening December. There's work that still can be done. And you're right, come January 20th, we are going to be in a state of war, battling folks who want to dismantle everything. And what I keep telling people, look, focus on that, build locally, and then also focus on 2026, because you can stop that nonsense in 2026 by voting the right way. So get rest, but also we got to stay focused and get to work.
Okay, so to watch the rest of that interview. All right, now let's go to this here. The article that I mentioned is from the USA Today, and it is about the hearing that took place in Representative Jasmine Crockett's comments during the hearing. It's called Rep. Crockett Goes Viral Over Criticism of Dismantle DEI Bill, Republicans' Use of Oppression. Republicans' use of oppression. U.S. Representative Jasmine Crockett went viral on Wednesday, and that was Wednesday, November 20th, 2024, after she criticized the Dismantle DEI Act proposed by Representative Michael Cloud, Republican of Texas. So this article was updated. This article is from November 21st, 2024 by Jonathan Limehouse for USA Today. And in this piece, it says United States Rep. Jasmine Crockett is defending the now viral comments she made on Wednesday toward Republican colleagues who had a bill in markup titled Dismantle DEI during a House committee meeting. The markup session is where they make changes to proposed bills or offer or recommend changes to proposed bills. Now, Crockett, who represents a congressional district in North Texas that includes portions of Dallas and Tarrant counties, made the remarks defending diversity, equity, and inclusion, better known as DEI, and criticizing the, quote, multiple white Republican men who argue that they are being oppressed, The 43-year-old wrote in an X post, formerly Twitter, on Thursday. She said, quote, I didn't bring race into anything. They did and always do. And then they twist history and dilute the definition of words. Okay, she said in the social media post. And I follow her on Instagram. I don't follow her on X. I don't use X a lot, and I'm about to probably would deactivate my account with X as well, but I do follow her on Instagram. Crockett's comments during the House Oversight Committee meeting came during the discussion of the Dismantle DEI bill proposed by Representative Michael Cloud, Republican of Texas. Now, it says here, Representative Clay Higgins, Republican of Louisiana, and these are both two former Confederate states, right? Texas and Louisiana, repeatedly referred to DEI policies as, quote unquote, oppression during the meeting, prompting Representative Jasmine Crockett to respond. Now, the same negative feelings that a lot of these white men had against affirmative action policies are the same feelings they have against diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay, so then she talked about there's no oppression for the white man in this country, etc. There's a piece here. Okay, what is the Dismantle DEI Act of 2024? So this is what I was referencing when I was speaking with Representative Jasmine Crockett. If the Dismantle DEI Act of 2024 became law, then it would effectively close all federal DEI offices and eliminate federal DEI programs. It would effectively close all federal DEI offices and eliminate federal DEI programs. Okay. Now, let me try to zoom in on this. Okay. The initiative brought on by Representative Cloud seeks to, quote unquote, prevent racism in the federal government, the bill's text reads. But racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Racism is a power structure. Racism occurs when one race of people control the majority of the wealth, power, resources, benefits, privileges, land, access to opportunity, access to education, and they use this to marginalize, subordinate, and do harm to another race of people. The racism as a power structure comes out of the concept of European white supremacy here in America, and this is for the purpose of preserving genetic white survival. So when I hear white people saying that they're trying to prevent racism by attacking and dismantling diversity, equity, and inclusion, when DEI programs had to be created because of systemic racism, because of decades of racism, then I have to ask them, what are you talking about? And this is why I ask the question when I hear these people, is the DEI is the new critical race theory. Notice they stopped talking about critical race theory so much, and they're attacking diversity, equity, and improvement programs, the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Just a couple years ago, the buzzword was critical race theory, right? And they were attacking critical race theory and saying critical race theory was being taught in K through 12. But critical race theory is a legal analysis created largely by African-American legal scholars like Derek Bell and Kimberly Crenshaw in the late 1960s to analyze the laws that were in place and to figure out why had not African-Americans made more advances after the civil rights movement. Okay, the Civil Rights Act of 64, Voting Rights Act of 65, Executive Order 114246 in September 1965, which is known as affirmative action, that executive order from President Lyndon Johnson, Fair Housing Act of 1968 under Johnson before Richard Nixon gets elected. And then also that Fair Housing Act had the first hate crimes act in the history of this country as well. Okay, that was part of the Fair Housing Act, and that was largely for African Americans, and that was as a result of the modern day civil rights movement. So there is a legal analysis to analyze the laws and the impacts of the laws, and it's taught in graduate school, law school, and a little bit in undergraduate level. Critical race theory is not taught in K through 12, but Fox News and the right wing and Republicans and people like Christopher Rufo and things like this made critical race theory the boogeyman for white Republicans, white conservatives to attack. Well, they're doing the same thing with diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. They're making it the boogeyman. They don't want to deal with the maldistribution of wealth, power, and resources. They don't want to deal with a history of racism in this country. And then when you start talking about that history, they say, stop dealing with the past. Okay. And what's interesting is that they want to suppress the teaching of a lot of this history in schools, history of slavery, civil rights movement, etc. Okay. But they want to go back to the same periods of time that they're trying to suppress the teaching of the history of and use laws from that same period of time to attack people in the present. So the Comstock Act of 1873, named after Anthony Comstock, that would bring about the nationwide ban on abortion, but also a ban on contraceptives, the Comstock Act. That's talked about in Project 2025, but in Project 2025, they refer to it by its U.S. criminal code as opposed to its actual name. I think it's USC 1462 or 1461. That's how it's referred to in Project 2025. They wanted, Donald Trump is talking about using the Aliens and Sedition Act of 1798. Okay, that's 5 years before the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. The Aliens and Sedition Act of 1798 is the law that was used in 1942 to round up the Japanese and put them in internment camps. It went through variations over the decades, but that's the law that was used to put the Japanese in internment camps. He wants to use that to round up 11 million or 12 million or 15 million or whatever number he wants to put on the number of undocumented immigrants in this country and deport them. Okay. Well, that's going to cause the economy to collapse. Okay. And you don't have enough law enforcement agents to even help with that. And you're going to run into real problems if you try to use the military to do that also. You have the Insurrection Act of 1807. Okay, that's 4 years after the Louisiana Purchase. And the Insurrection Act can be used by the president in during periods of a crisis and things like this, to use the military to put down insurrections, what they term are insurrections. That's the Insurrection Act of 1807. So when you go back and you look at a lot of the laws that they're talking about using, many of these laws are coming from a period of time when they're trying to suppress the teaching of that history. If you look at in Georgia, when you had his name just escaped my mind. Hold on. In Georgia, you had the 3 white men that killed Ahmaud Arbery, right? I've talked about this here on the African History Network show. This is understanding how laws and policies impact every aspect of our life. The law that the 3 white men who killed Ahmaud Arbery, the law that they were using to say that they were trying to enact a citizen's arrest, that law dates back to 1863, when Georgia was part of the Confederacy. Okay? That dates back to 1863, when Georgia was part of the Confederacy, and it was specifically designed to target fugitive runaway slaves who were running away from plantations in Georgia and running behind enemy lines. Okay? Now that law went through changes over the years, but it was still in effect when Ahmaud Arbery was killed. All right, and I want to find this piece here. There was now that law was repealed. Okay, after Ahmaud Arbery's death, that law was repealed. There's a piece here from National Public Radio, NPR.org or NPR.com, that talks about this. And I'll go back to the piece from USA Today. But this is an example of how elections have consequences. And I heard people saying that, you know, they weren't going to vote because they ain't like Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. It's about the policies, understanding the ramification of policies, understanding who's going to be attorney general. Okay, luckily Matt Gaetz dropped out. Matt Gaetz would have been a disaster as attorney general. First of all, he wasn't even qualified to be attorney general. It's not even clear if he's ever practiced law. He does have a law degree. It's not clear he's ever practiced law. He definitely was never a prosecutor. Okay, and he definitely has never managed any type of large organizations. Pam Bondi, even though I don't like her as attorney general, she's more qualified to be attorney general. She's a former attorney general of the state of Florida. And she's been a prosecutor. She's actually practiced law. Okay, I think she's still a bad choice, but she would be better than Matt Gaetz. Okay, so if we look at this piece here from NPR.org, in Ahmaud Arbery's name, Georgia repeals citizens arrest law. This is from May 11th, 2021. Okay, and here's Ahmaud Arbery's mother and sister. It talks, I want to see, because I had some articles where it actually talked about the law. But it says here, today we are replacing a Civil War era law ripe for abuse with language that balances the sacred right to self-defense of a person and a property with our shared responsibility to root out injustice and set our state on a path forward, on a better path forward. Okay. The law which allowed any citizen to arrest another if a crime was committed within his immediate knowledge has been replaced with the specific language to provide the citizen detainment in specific circumstances, including shopkeepers who witness shoplifters and restaurant owners and employees who witness dine and dash customers. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, this one, I don't think this has the information that I wanted in it. I had some other articles on that topic. Let me try to find something here. All right, give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. Okay, yeah, this is one from Reuters. This is one from Reuters. Slavery era law in focus in Georgia case. Let's look at this here. All right, so this is a piece from Reuters.com that came out October 27, 2021. Slavery era Georgia law in focus in trial over Ahmaud Arbery's killing. So they're constantly trying to suppress the teaching of the history, but they're constantly using laws from the same period of time where they're trying to suppress the teaching of. A pivotal defense argument of the three white men on trial in Georgia for killing Ahmaud Arbery, a black jogger, is that they were trying to make a citizen's arrest under a Civil War era law that was later repealed amid an uproar over the shooting. Okay, so the fatal shooting took place February 23rd, 2020. We all remember that, and the protest behind that. And that was before, 3 months before George Floyd was killed, May 25th, 2020. Okay, now, let me close this stuff out. Okay. Before Arbery's killing, the law had been largely unchanged since it was codified in 1863 when Georgia was part of the slave-holding Southern Confederacy during the U.S. Civil War. Okay, most of the U.S. states have codified some form of law allowing citizens arrest. The American Civil Liberties Union and others that successfully sought to repeal the law said the state's statute was originally passed to enable the capture of escaped slaves. Chris Slobogan, a law professor at Tennessee's Vanderbilt University, said citizens' arrest laws put dangerous powers in untrained hands. Okay, so read the rest of this here. All right, but this law was designed to target runaway slaves. And it was still on the books in 2020. All right, now, let's go back to the piece from USA Today and give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. If you like this type of information, also you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN show through Cash App and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. This helps us keep doing the work, stay on the air, keep broadcasting. Register for the online history classes that I teach on Saturdays, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Next class is coming up Saturday, November 30th. 2024, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. You can download my lesson plan here. Click on download. It's a lesson plan for each class. There's 200 slides that I show you in the class. There's 80 to 100 articles we'll look at. There's 15 books that we reference. You don't have to buy any of the books to follow along in class. I'll also show you excerpts of interviews I've done with some of our scholars like Professor James Small, Professor Kaba Kamene, Anthony Browder, Runoko Rashidi, and others. Okay, there's a preview here that you can watch as well. And then our Cash App information, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App. Here's our QR code. And also when you go to our Cash App, it'll probably say Michael. It may show my picture there. And we have our Cash App here. And these are some fake African History Network Cash App accounts that have been stealing money from us. I'm still trying to get shut down. And click on this link here for our PayPal link as well. All right, let's go back to this piece here from USA Today. And it's talking about Representative Jasmine Crockett's comments at this Dismantle DEI Act hearing. But it says if the Dismantle DEI Act of 2024 became law, then it would effectively close all federal DEI offices and eliminate federal DEI programs. Vice President-elect J.D. Vance previously sponsored an identical bill, but his and Representative Cloud's have only been introduced and have not made it past the House or the Senate. The bill cleared its first hurdle on Thursday when it passed the House Oversight Committee in a vote that fell on party lines 23-17, because with Republicans controlling the House of Representatives, they control all the committees as well. So they have more people on the committees, so they can just push through these bills that they want. That was Thursday, November 21st. This is why another example of how elections have consequences. DEI programs masquerade as fairness while instead fostering division, inefficiency, and discrimination in our institutions, Representative Cloud said in a statement released Thursday. They waste taxpayer dollars and undermine the merit-based principles that have made America strong. The Dismantle DEI Act takes aim at this harmful ideology and will root out of our government, ensuring our institutions focus on the mission of serving the American people efficiently and effectively. It didn't talk about fighting racism. Didn't talk about fighting white supremacy. You need diversity, equity, and inclusion because of racism and white supremacy. And this is a trick that these white supremacists, like Representative Cloud and these other white supremacists who are supporting Donald Trump in the House and the Senate, this is one of the tricks that they do. They want to attack the remedy, but they don't want to talk about why the remedy is needed. They want to attack diversity, equity, and inclusion, but they don't want to deal with a history of racism and discrimination in this country, which is why you need diversity, equity, and inclusion. If we look here, back in 2020, this study came out from Citigroup Bank, and I hit these people with facts and evidence. Okay, this deals with how the U.S. economy has lost $16 trillion over a 20-year period of time. So I'm going to show you a few examples of this evidence that I'm talking about. Okay, so just bear with me here. How's everybody doing? I did a broadcast about this when it came out. This is from September 23rd, 2020, from CBS News. Racism. Hold on, let me close out this video. Racism cost the U.S. $16 trillion Citigroup fines. Now, this was a study done by Citigroup Bank. Okay, this was a study done by Citigroup Bank. And we're going to look at this here briefly. If I can close these damn ads out. America could have been $16 trillion richer if not for inequities in education, housing, wages, and business investment between Black and white Americans over the past 20 years, new research concludes. The study released by Citigroup is the latest in a body of research that attempt to quantify the economic impact of systemic racism. Citigroup arrived at a $16 trillion figure after estimating that Black workers have lost $113 billion in potential wages over the past 2 decades because they could not get a college degree. The housing market lost $218 billion in sales because African-American applicants could not get home loans. About $13 trillion in business revenue never flowed into the U.S. economy because African-American entrepreneurs could not access bank loans, right? So when you talk about trying to put policies in place to address these structural inequities, those like Representative Cloud, those like the Republicans on that committee that benefit from the structural inequities, they'll call the remedy racism, but ignore the real history of racism. So this is why they're throwing around this term of oppression and don't even know what it means. Now, the article from CBS News goes on to say, what's more, the U.S. could have $5 trillion in gross domestic product over the next 5 years if those gaps and others were closed today, the study indicated. So this deals with changing laws and policies. This deals with changing laws and policies. Quote, racial inequality has always had an outsized cost, one that was thought to be paid only by underrepresented groups, Citigroup banking chair Raymond McGuire said in a statement. What this report underscores is that this tariff is levied on all of us, end quote. It's showing how racism hurts everybody, but African Americans are disproportionately impacted by racism. Federal Reserve data show that white households' net worth grew 43% to $61,200 between 1995 and 2016, while it remained flat at $35,000 for African-American families. Now, we know it's increased under Biden-Harris as well. It's about 45,000 or so, something like that. We know the median household net worth for African-Americans has increased 60% under the Biden-Harris administration. But check this article out here. This is from 2020. Okay. Racism has cost the U.S. $16 trillion Citigroup fines. Then we can look at this piece here from, I did a segment of the African History Network show a few months ago, early this year, dealing with this new book by Andrew Carl. And this book deals with how African Americans have been overtaxed when it comes to property taxes by $600 billion. Let's see here. This is an article from Black Enterprise. Let's look at this one here briefly. New book reveals how New book reveals how the U.S. stole $600 billion from Black Americans through unfair taxes post-slavery. This is after slavery ends. And I was going to this article also about Scott Turner, this piece from CNN.com about Scott Turner, because he was named to HUD, Secretary of HUD by Donald Trump, African-American, former NFL player. He did work in HUD under Dr. Ben Carson. Okay. So at least he has some experience working in HUD. But I knew they were going to give HUD to the black guy. I knew they were going to give HUD to the black guy. Check out this article here from CNN.com. Trump names former NFL player Scott Turner as his pick for Secretary of HUD, as HUD Secretary. This is from November 22nd, 2024. And he was executive director of the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council under Trump's first term. They're still talking about those opportunity zones that didn't have a big impact. All right, now let's look at this here. I wanted this one from blackamericaweb.com. I mean, not Black America, Black Enterprise. So let's close this one out, and this is the one I want to go to. So it talks about unfair property taxes, and this is one of the main ways, over-assessing property taxes is one of the main ways historically, white domestic terrorists running us off our land. It was actually using the law to take land away from us. So this is a piece from April 24th, 2024 by Jocelyn Jovan. New book reveals how the U.S. stole $600 billion from Black Americans through unfair taxes post-slavery. And in the book, Andrew Carl, a professor of history and African-American studies at the University of Virginia, put extensive research in his new book, which describes how U.S. bureaucracies created the nation's ongoing racial wealth gap by implementing a system of highly unjust municipal and state tax, Bloomberg reported. Because Bloomberg has an article on this as well. Let me refresh the screen. Okay, hold on. This is freezing up on me. All right, for some reason, I'm trying to see this. For some reason, this froze up. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing. Testing 1, 2, 3. Let me try to hold on for a second, because this froze up and I can't switch screens. It's Google Chrome just on me. So give me a minute while I have to refresh all this, and then we should be able to continue. Okay, we're back. All right, we're back. So we should be streaming. You should be able to hear me. Okay, let's continue. Let's go back to the we were looking at the article from Black Enterprise. Okay, let me bring this back up. All right, so we're back. You should be able to hear me okay, hopefully. All right, hold on. Now I got to see if something just happened. Hold on, I'm trying to find my other controls. Damn. Oh, here we go. Okay, so this article here from Black Enterprise, this deals with the book by Andrew Carl. New book reveals how the U.S. stole $600 billion from Black Americans through unfair taxes post-slavery. All right, and in the article, it says Andrew W. Carl, professor of history and African American Studies at the University of Virginia. Put extensive research in his new book, which describes how U.S. bureaucracies created the nation's ongoing racial wealth gap. How U.S. bureaucracies, okay, the government, created the nation's ongoing wealth gap by implementing a system of highly unjust municipal and state taxes, Bloomberg reported. Okay, Bloomberg News. The black tax, 150 years of theft, exploitation, and dispossession in America, shares statistics, studies, and tales of Black Americans being cheated out of land ownership and pushed into poverty by racist laws and practices dating back to the Jim Crow era, okay? And pushed into poverty by racist laws and practices dating back to the Jim Crow era. Andrew Carl said, this history sheds new light on the forces generating economic inequality in America and the racial character of those inequalities. All right, now let's go back to this here. The book pairs personal stories with rich details about municipalities nationwide that use complex tax collection to fund distribution to white land and property owners and the economic dynamics spanning over a century of the U.S. history. So this is all post-slavery. And the structural inequities that exist today are the legacy of slavery. So you have to address the structural inequities in the maldistribution of wealth, power, and resources that happen because of laws. Starting in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, unfair tactics were used to doubly disadvantage Black landowners by artificially inflating property value estimates for tax collection. Doubly disadvantage Black landowners by artificially inflating property value estimates for tax collection, overcharging them for their land and exploiting their inability to pay as a means to seize their properties. So I want to go to this example. They give a few examples here in the article. I want to go to this example here. This is about a man named Hilary Thomas Sr. In 1920, Hilary Thomas Sr. lost 24 acres of land in a tax sale. 24 acres of land in a tax sale, quote unquote, under dubious circumstances after the great-great-grandfather of George Floyd failed to pay $18.83 in taxes, losing the land forced the Stewart family into poverty. So Hilary Thomas Stewart Sr. was the great-great-grandfather of George Floyd, who we know was killed May 25th, 2020 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Because Hilary Thomas Stewart Sr. did not have the $18.83 to pay the property taxes on his 24 acres of land, he lost that land, and that pushed his family into poverty and probably had an impact on the quality of life that George Floyd lived. So what this is showing is the ripple effect and the generational impact that racism has had in this country. So when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion to start to repair some of that damage, then you have these white people, like these Republicans on this House committee, that want to attack it but don't want to deal with the history of racism that's been inflicted upon African Americans that maldistributed the wealth, power, and resources in the first place. So what they want to say is everything is equal now. Okay, let's just let bygones be bygones. Everything is equal now. We have an equal society, merit-based society. Okay, well, if merit and hard work were the basis of success in this country, nobody will be more successful than a slave, because we dominated the skilled trades. There were at least 262 skilled trades and crafts that African people had in this country from 1619 to 1865. And it was African slave labor that largely built this country. Yes, you had immigrants that contributed to it, but the majority of that is going to be African slave labor prior to 1865. When looking at the 11 million acres of land taken from African Americans, it equates to $326 billion in today's dollars. Not to forget the millions in taxes that African Americans have overpaid for a century. From 1870 to 1920, African Americans were overtaxed by more than $27.5 billion, I should say. From 1870 to 2020, hold on, what is this? African Americans were overtaxed by more than $27.5 billion in 2023 dollars. Yeah, it's 275. That's what I thought. It's okay. You remove the line. Yeah, that's what I thought. $275 billion, overtaxed by more than $275 billion in 2023 dollars. Okay, so read the rest of this piece here. This is from blackamericaweb.com. I mean, blackenterprise.com. I read Black America Web also. Blackenterprise.com. New book reveals how the U.S. stole $600 billion from Black Americans through unfair taxes post-slavery. All right, now, I gotta see how to do this. They put these new controls up here. And let's see. Okay, now next example. Let's see. Don't want to look at another example. Well, I pulled this up, so let's look at this quickly. Since they were in Congress, right? Let's look at this example. And I find it interesting that a lot of these congressmen don't want to talk about this. So there was a study that came out recently that dealt with at least 1,800 congressmen throughout history actually owned slaves. And this is analysis by the Washington Post. And this is why a lot of these people don't want the history to be taught. See, they have no problem talking about the 4th of July. And they'll have their celebrations on the 4th of July, things like this. And they have no problem with white history being taught. Okay, but when you start talking about information like this, that becomes very dangerous. Because now you're getting into the real history of this country. You're dealing with how laws and policies were put in place to actually oppress people, oppress African Americans. And then that causes an oppressed people to realize, wait a second, we need to fight for scarce wealth, power, and resources. We have to also not just gain economic power, but political power and more seats in political office to put laws in place that are more beneficial to us, and laws that are beneficial to African Americans are beneficial to America in general. So this is from the Washington Post. More than 1,800 congressmen once enslaved Black people. This is who they were and how they shaped the nation. The Washington Post has compiled the first database of slave-holding members of Congress by examining thousands of pages of census records and historical documents. And I have to see what date this is from as well. And I have a subscription. I still have my subscription to the Washington Post. I'm logged in right now. That's why it says the AHN show. I'm logged into my account. I pay them each month. Pay the New York Times. I'm trying to figure out why I'm paying the New York Times $25 a month though. I gotta get a lower rate from the New York Times. I pay National Geographic $25 a month. There's a number of different media sources, digital newspapers, things like this that I pay each month to be able to get this type of information. For the first 7 decades of its existence, Congress returned again and again to one acrimonious topic: slavery. Many of the lawmakers arguing in Washington were participants in the brutal institution at home. Here's what they looked like on March 7th, 1850, as Senator Daniel Webster delivered a famous speech about slavery. More than 40 of the 106 congressmen listening owned human beings. More than 40 of the 106 congressmen listening owned human beings. Those slaveholders included Jefferson Davis, okay? And Jefferson Davis is going to become the president of the Confederacy, that traitor, Jefferson Davis, Andrew Johnson, and Sam Houston, okay? We know Houston, Texas is named after Sam Houston. Again, you had Sam Houston in the Battle of the Alamo, and Texas won its independence from Mexico in 1836. Now, 1850, that's going to be the year that you have what's known as the Compromise of 1850. And the Compromise of 1850 organizes the land that the U.S. gets from Mexico as a result of the Mexican-American War. Okay, it's the Compromise of 1850, and the U.S. gets the territories that make up California, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Nevada. They get all that land from Mexico, and California comes into the Union in 1850 as a free state, but then they're going to pass a law to ban all free African Americans in the state of California. There were 5 laws that make up the Compromise of 1850. One of those laws also was the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 that went farther than the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793, Fugitive Slave Act of I think 1793, signed by George Washington. All right, let's go back to this clip here. Go back to the article. So this piece is from January 10th, 2022. And it talks about how from the founding of the United States until long after the U.S. Civil War, hundreds of the elected leaders writing the nation's laws were current or former slave owners. More than 1,800 people served in the U.S. Congress in the 18th and 19th and even 20th centuries, owned human beings at some point in their lives, according to a Washington Post investigation of census records, and other historical records. Some were owners of enormous plantations, like Senator Edward Lloyd V of Maryland, who enslaved 468 people in 1832 on the same estate where abolitionist Frederick Douglass was enslaved as a child. Many exerted great influence on the issue of slavery, like Senator Elias Kent Kane, who enslaved 5 people in Illinois in 1820 and tried to formally legalize slavery in the state of Illinois. As northern states outlawed slavery, the proportion of congressmen who were slave owners declined. But some congressmen in New England continued to enslave people until at least 1820, and some representatives of New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and other states continued to enslave people for at least a decade longer. Enslavers from all parts of the political spectrum. Enslavers came from all parts of the political spectrum. The Washington Post database includes lawmakers who were members of more than 60 political parties. More than 60 political parties. Federalists, the Whig Party, which starts in the 1830s, the Whig Party, and dies out in the 1850s. The Unionist Party, Populists, Progressives, Prohibitionists, and dozens more. All those parties included slaveholders. Also, there were Republicans who owned slaves as well. Okay. Now, the Republican Party wasn't founded to 1854 as a direct backlash of what's known as the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. But you're going to have Republicans as general, not necessarily Republicans in Congress, but Republicans in general. There was a piece that I was reading, and a couple months ago. And let me see, which one was that? You got one from CNN. Yes, Republicans. Let me see. Hold on. No, not that one. That's not the one I want. Which one? NBC News has a piece on this as well. 1,700 racist lawmakers highlight the ubiquity of slaveholding in Congress. Let me see something here. Well, I'll have to find it later. One example, it talks about the Missouri Compromise of 1820. Now, the Missouri, I teach about this in the second online history class that I teach, Black resistance movements from 1492 to 1968. The Missouri Compromise came about as a law to organize the land that the U.S. got from the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. So the U.S. gets territory from France, 828,000 square miles of land, and the U.S. is going to carve out about 15 states from that land that they get from France in the Louisiana Purchase. They get all this land for about $15 million, right? And it allows Maine to come in as a free state and Missouri to come into the Union as a slaveholding state. But the rest of the territory, the Missouri Compromise abolishes that land and the rest of the territory. When Congress voted on the 1820 Missouri Compromise, which prohibited the expansion of slavery in the northern half of the country, the House and Senate contained a nearly equal number of slaveholders and non-slaveholding states because they try to keep a balance between slaveholding states and non-slaveholding states. Almost twice as many slaveholders, or 44%, voted against the agreement, the Missouri Compromise, compared with 25% of non-slaveholders. The law was crafted by a slaveholder, Henry Clay, who is so renowned as one of America's greatest statesmen that 16 counties around the country are named for him. There's a picture of that's John McLean, Ohio congressman and later Supreme Court justice. He dissented in the notorious 1857 Dred Scott decision. So the Missouri Compromise becomes part of the ruling in the Dred Scott decision because the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that part of Dred Scott's part of his argument was that because he was taken into the Wisconsin territory, that he was free, okay? And the Wisconsin territory was made free because of the Missouri Compromise of 1820. But the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional because it deprived slaveholders of their right to due process, okay, of their Fourth Amendment right to due process. And so that was part of the ruling and part of them ruling against Dred Scott. It wasn't just them saying no black man had any rights that a white man was bound to respect or honor, anything like that. No, it was because they ruled that the Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional. Okay. All right, and there's an article on the Missouri Compromise as well, and there's an article from history.com, okay, and that was a violation of the Fifth Amendment. It was dealing with due process. It was saying it was robbing them of their due process when it came to because you're stripping them of their ability to own slaves. So this is the argument that the U.S. Supreme Court was making. All right, you can read the rest of this here. Read the rest of this piece from the Washington Post. More than 1,800 congressmen once enslaved Black people. This is who they were and how they shaped the nation. Okay. And if we look here at Webster's Dictionary, Merriam-Webster Online, we look at the definition of oppression. Okay, this is from Merriam-Webster Online. Oppression. Can I stop this video? Unjust or cruel exercise of authority or power. Unjust or cruel exercise of authority or power. Another definition, something that oppresses, especially in being an unjust or excessive exercise of power. Okay, so check that out also. All right, so look, hopefully you learned a lot today. This was that was excellent what Representative Jasmine Crockett as well as Representative Summer Lee did in that hearing. These are the types of bills that Republicans are putting forth. These are and even if you look at what Trump is talking about now, he's not talking about any policies to bring down inflation. He's nominating a lot of these unqualified people, a lot of these, let's be honest, unqualified white people. Where your policies on inflation? Because your tariffs are going to increase inflation and will probably cause a recession. So people, I'm going to do a separate broadcast dealing with these people who he's nominating, like Russell Vought, who's the architect of Project 2025. After Donald Trump said he had nothing to do with Project 2025, then he goes and nominates people who helped write it. And you nominate Russell Vought, who worked in the Office of Management and Budget under the Trump administration, the first Trump administration. But this guy is the architect of Project 2025. And Donald Trump is, and NBC News has an article on this, he is tapping into people who wrote Project 2025 to staff his cabinet. Like this article right here from the Associated Press. This one right here. After Trump's Project 2025 denials, he is tapping its authors and influencers for key roles. Why is that? As a former and potentially future president, Donald Trump hailed what would become Project 2025 as a roadmap for, quote, exactly what our movement will do, end quote, with another crack at the White House. As the blueprint for a hard right turn in America became a liability in 2020, in the 2024 campaign, Trump pulled an about face. He denied knowing anything about the, quote, ridiculous and abysmal, end quote, plans written in part by his first term aides and allies. Now, after being elected, the 47th president on November 5th, Trump is stocking his second administration with key players in the detailed effort he temporarily shunned. Most notably, Trump has tapped Russell Vought for an encore as director of the Office of Management and Budget. Tom Homan, his former immigration chief, he's tapped him as border czar, quote unquote border czar. They're making up a position for him because border czar doesn't even exist. And immigration hardliner Stephen Miller as deputy chief of policy. Those moves have accelerated criticisms from Democrats who warn that Trump's election hands government reins to movement conservatives who spent years envisioning how to concentrate power in the West Wing and impose a starkly rightward shift across the U.S. government and society. Read the rest of this here. So in other words, he lied. This is what I was telling people. I was telling people he was lying. Now, I don't think he read Project 2025 because he doesn't read anything. But he knows about it. He knows who wrote it. He knows Kevin Roberts, who's the president of the Heritage Foundation. And the Heritage Foundation is one that put this out. He knows Russell Vought. Russell Vought is the architect of Project 2025. He knows about the policies. And Project 2025 mirrors Agenda 47, which were Donald Trump's policies at his campaign website. Project 2025 actually shows how to implement Agenda 47. So all you dumbasses who sat up there repeating this nonsense for Donald Trump, he didn't know anything about Project 2025 and didn't know who wrote it, anything like that. You are the biggest loser. Okay, you've been had, you've been took, led astray, run amok, bamboozled. And I laid out the evidence. I told you about this before the election. All right, visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can support the African History Network. $, the AHN show. through Cash App and through PayPal as well, paypal.me/the AHN show. So we have our Cash App link here right on the homepage of our website, as well as PayPal. So that helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, etc. Pay some of the bills. Register for the fantastic online history course I teach on Saturdays, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, we do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch this anytime. And even after the course is over with, you'll still have access to watch the class. Ancient Kemet, one of the original names for Egypt, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. It's a 12-week online history course. It just started up. Click right here to register. And you can do debit card or credit card or pay through PayPal. We have our class lesson plan right here as well. There are over 200 slides that we look at in the class, 80 to 100 articles, 15 books that we reference. You don't have to buy any of the books. I'll show you excerpts of the book right on the screen. The video clips that we look at, etc. Interviews I've done with many of our scholars like Professor James Small, Professor Kaba Kamene, Anthony Browder, Runoko Rashidi, and more. Click right here to download the lesson plan, and you can. We have a overview of the class right here as well. All right, look, we have to get out of here. Remember, at the African History Network, let's see here. So hopefully you all learned a lot today. Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever, and we'll talk to you next time. Peace.